In histories of science fiction film, there is one movie that weirdly goes without mention. I suspect that is because it is a Disney film, but despite being one of Disney's most iconic films, furnishing media, merchandise, and theme park attractions for decades, this film barely even warrants a mention among Disney fans. It seems like it has largely been forgotten, relegated to a historical footnote. Yet few films in Disney history and science fiction have been as important to those genres as the mightiest motion picture of them all, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Walt Disney had been trying through the 1940s to make a wholly live action feature. There were the quasi documentaries The Reluctant Dragon and Victory Through Air Power, and the hybrid live action animation films Song of the South and So Dear to My Heart. After World War II, the Disney company had funds tied up in England that it used on a series of 4 live action historical dramas: Treasure Island, The Story of Robin Hood, The Sword and the Rose, and Rob Roy, the Highland Rogue. These were sufficient to prompt Disney to finally take the plunge and build a soundstage for a genuine Hollywood production. A suitable subject was found in a name pulled from Walt's misty boyhood: Jules Verne. The choice of material was a strange one. First of all, it was strange for Walt Disney to choose a science fiction film. He had already established himself as a purveyor of fairy tale cartoons and Americana. Why would he want to throw himself into a genre like science fiction? The golden age of science fiction had barely begun. Most people's concept of the genre were cheaply produced, low concept, disposable serials like Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, and Radar Men from the Moon. Those fresher, high concept, more prestigious science fiction features that had been produced, like Day the Earth Stood Still, Destination Moon, and War of the Worlds, were hardly material one would expect from Disney. These were often paranoid, threatening films that channeled the anxieties of the atom bomb and the Cold War. Secondly, if you're going to do a science fiction film, why would you choose Jules Verne? Film emerged as a medium just as Verne himself passed away, and his technological prognostications were being outpaced by reality. In film's earliest days, Georges Méliès found Verne's works to be a fertile source for his fairy tale-like flights of fancy. But between Méliès and Disney, Verne had barely been adapted to film at all. Except for a 1916 adaptation of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and a very loose 1929 adaptation of Mysterious Island, the overwhelming majority of Verne adaptations were of his Russian spy thriller Michael Strogoff. You see, most of Verne's novels weren't even science fiction in the sense that we think of it. They were more straightforward adventure stories, set in far-flung, exotic locations beyond the means, but not the imagination, of 19th century readers. More often than not, Verne's incredible inventions were a means to an end of getting his explorers to their destination, be it under the sea or round the moon. Even his Journey to the Center of the Earth is a time travel story without a time travel machine, descending through time by literally descending through geologic strata. That all had a cooling effect on Verne's popularity over time. Even by the 1920s, let alone the 1950s, his technological predictions were coming true and, therefore, outdated. Submarines and airships, which were novelties in Verne's writings, had become terrifying realities in World Wars I and II. Furthermore, film had supplanted Verne's role as a writer of exotic, far-flung places. Audiences of the 50s could see on screen what Verne could only describe on paper. Even Disney himself had begun a series of nature documentaries in 1948 called The True Life Adventures, and a spin-off series of cultural documentaries called People and Places, starting in 1953. So of what possible relevance was Jules Verne? Well, by an interesting quirk, it was in their middle age that Walt Disney's generation began to look nostalgically back on their childhoods before the World Wars and Great Depression. The so-called gay 90s, gay as in happy and 90s as in 1890s, was, to people of the mid 20th century, what nostalgia for the mid 20th century is to people of today. The term gay 90s is widely credited to Richard Vincent Cutler, who began a series of nostalgic cartoons for Life magazine in 1925. Hammerstein and Kern's stage musical Sweet Adeline debuted in 1929 and was adapted to screen in 1934. Abbott and Costello had fun with the naughty 90s in 1945, in which is found the famous rendition of their Who's on First routine. Judy Garland made her mark through the 40s with The Wizard of Oz, Meet Me in St. Louis, The Harvey Girls, Easter Parade, and In the Good Old Summertime. Before her, Mae West added a risque element in pre-code Hollywood in such films as She Done Him Wrong, Belle of the 90s, and Klondike Annie. Disney was already trading in the gay 90s with shorts like The Nifty 90s, Football Now and Then, and the aforementioned feature film So Dear to My Heart, which Walt said was a snapshot of his boyhood growing up in small-town America at the turn of the century. The popularity of the gay 90s Victorian setting cast a nostalgic eye back at Jules Verne. It also helped that his works were beginning to enter the public domain. But their age also furnished something else that would make Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea a true work of genius. Science fiction films of the 50s channeled and expressed anxiety over the atom bomb, the potential annihilation of life on Earth, the Cold War, and communist totalitarianism. The genius of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was to turn Verne's book about oceanographic exploration into an atomic age parable set 100 years in the past. A safe and reassuring distance to examine those anxieties from, with the implicit message that these anxieties themselves are a thing of the past, and that modern society is wise enough to use the atom responsibly. It was a stroke of brilliance that set Disney's film apart from virtually every other sci-fi film of the 50s. And we know this is the meaning of the film because Disney all but said so. A couple years later, Disney produced a television documentary called Our Friend the Atom that begins right where 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ends. It then spends the rest of the documentary outlining how the atom could be used responsibly for good, productive, and peaceful purposes. Even the title of the show, Our Friend the Atom, is a comforting, reassuring message amidst panic-stricken educational films and giant monster movies. It would be a disservice to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, though, to say that it is only a thematic picture, merely a comforting, kinder, gentler, more reassuring atomic age movie. It is also a darn good movie in its own right. A theme only goes so far. That theme needs a story to carry it, and needs characters to carry the story. That is, sadly, where many more critically acclaimed, so-called cerebral and intellectual science fiction movies fail. They are carried by theme and visual spectacle and little else. So 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea has the overarching, reassuring theme of atomic power's responsible use. But that theme is told through a powerful, engaging story of a genius driven mad by grief who is waging war against the surface world and within himself. And that story is conveyed through the character drama of three men taken captive aboard this madman submarine and their conflicting attempts to thwart his madness. The four actors bring a kind of charisma to their roles that just doesn't exist in modern Hollywood, and it's fascinating to watch the changing dynamics between them. There is the tormented Captain Nemo, played with screen-cracking intensity by James Mason. Nobody has ever embodied that role as thoroughly as he has, no matter how many remakes and variations on the story there has been. In him is embodied the confounding tensions between virtue and vengeance, between justice and revenge, that are as relevant now as they've ever been. And despite his pretenses of abandoning the surface world, Nemo replicates it very nicely beneath the waves, where he rules as an absolute potentate. Nevertheless, his seething hate and anger, whether righteous or hypocritical or both, still harbors a hope that maybe his scientific discoveries actually could be used for good. The pessimist is just a wounded optimist. Arguably, no other Disney character even approaches Captain Nemo's complexity. On the side of civilization are Nemo's three captives. Paul Lucas plays Professor Aronnax, the absent-minded academic who is appalled by Nemo, but nonetheless tries to reason with him and lead him to share his secrets with the world. His companion is Conseil, played by Peter Lorre, who forms a friendship with the sailor Ned Land, played by Kirk Douglas. Conseil is loyal to the professor, but understands the threat that Nemo poses, so he finds himself struggling to find some way of stopping Nemo and saving the professor, mostly from himself. Ned, a symbol of robust American manhood, despite being French-Canadian in the original novel, is just 100% determined to stop Nemo, until his own natural heroism confounds both him and his captor during the show-stopping giant squid attack. These aren't one-note archetypes, mechanically fulfilling their roles. These are growing, changing characters, crashing through their story arcs with a ferocity that might be unexpected by the passive watcher of Disney's cartoons. And because it's still a Disney film, we still get a fun song and a funny animal to go along with it all. Then there is Nautilus itself, and the ocean in which it sails, which are practically characters in their own right. The Nautilus is both an extension of Nemo and his shell, his vehicle for exerting his will on the world and for sheltering himself from it. The opulent salon is his internal world, a world of beauty, art, music, and science that is hidden deep within a metal shell designed to lash out at the external world that tried to crush him, and into which these three strangers have come to test his conscience. And how beautiful is it? Disney's production designer Harper Goff diverged from the original novel's sleek, futuristic craft to give us a rugged, bolted and riveted, thoroughly Victorian-looking ship. The Nautilus is Nemo's means to claim the ocean as his new Eden, his paradise away from the suffering of the world. Adam is the Hebrew word for man, and is a cognate for earth or ground, as the thing from which man was created. Nemo is a Latin word meaning no one. He imagines himself something other than a man, a new man born not of the earth, but of the sea. One of the most remarkable features of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is its location shooting in the Bahamas. We really are under the sea. We really are on a tropical island, both places being infused with wonder and mystery. Being Disney, no expense was spared either. This was exotic adventure in full, lavish Technicolor and CinemaScope. Its production values still look impressive today. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea applies Disney's lessons from producing its true-life adventure nature documentaries to the live-action adventure film genre, and reaped the rewards. It is magical and alive. Heck, its making-of TV show, Operation Undersea, even won an Emmy Award for Best Documentary. Disney actually produced 3 television shows to tie in with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The Disneyland TV series, not the park, but the TV series, is a fascinating subject in its own right. It began in 1954, and its introductory episode even includes some behind-the-scenes footage of 20,000 Leagues production. It was ostensibly designed to promote Disney's films and the opening of the Disneyland theme park in 1955. But it acted more subtly than just being a glorified weekly commercial. The TV series was divided into 4 abstract, conceptual spaces that mirrored the 4 themed lands of the physical park in Anaheim, California. Frontierland was the realm of America's history and reaffirmation of its values. a heroic narrative about America's past. Tomorrowland was the realm of scientific discovery and technological innovation, an optimistic narrative about America's future. Adventureland was the realm of wonder at exotic lands and peoples, and Fantasyland was the realm of imagination, embodied in Disney's own cartoons. The three shows produced to capitalize on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea situate the film in these different lands in different ways. Our Friend the Atom was a Tomorrowland documentary through and through. Operation Undersea came from Fantasyland, highlighting the story's fantastical elements. Nevertheless, its behind-the-scenes look at the film's on-location shooting situates 20,000 Leagues with Adventureland, the true-life adventures, and the romance of the exotic. And then Monsters of the Deep was another documentary from Fantasyland, which situated 20,000 Leagues with the romance and legends of the ocean, comparing the film's thrilling squid attack scene with the equally thrilling dinosaurs of Fantasia and Monstro the Whale's attack in Pinocchio, and subtextually aligning this new live-action film with the grand tradition of Disney's best animation. Of course, Disneyland the TV show was the precursor to Disneyland the theme park, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea had its place there as well. In fact, its original place was supposed to be on Main Street, USA. And the Opera House that currently houses Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln was originally planned to be a walkthrough of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea's sets. It might seem idiosyncratic to put a science fiction story into Walt's gay 90s platonic ideal of turn-of-the-century small-town America, but remember that 20,000 Leagues was supposed to be the displacement of atomic anxiety to 100 years in the past. Tomorrowland was originally set to the year 1986, a far distant future of global peace, freedom, and scientific progress. However, a lack of attractions in Tomorrowland ended up shunting the walkthrough over there anyways, where it lasted until Adventures Through Inner Space occupied the building in 1967, followed by Star Tours in 1987. It's an interesting irony that once Tomorrowland reached its futuristic date, its emphasis shifted to just science fiction. In particular, a franchise set a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea will go on to furnish a submarine ride in Walt Disney World's Fantasyland, a walkthrough of the Nautilus in Disneyland Paris's version of Tomorrowland, which is primarily inspired by Jules Verne's writings, what with it being in France and all, and the whole Mysterious Island section of Tokyo Disney Sea, with my two favorite theme park rides anywhere in the world, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Journey to the Center of the Earth. Though the submarines are gone, 20,000 Leagues was commemorated in the Trader Sam's Tiki Bar in Walt Disney World, and it may be that tiki and oceanic tropical escapism is the future for the multi-layered mercurial meanings of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But at the time of its release, 20,000 Leagues was an inseparable component of Disney's evolution into a true cultural phenomenon. During the 30s and 40s, Disney had emerged as a darling film studio of Hollywood's golden age. But it wasn't until after the war, in the 50s, that Disney became a genuine cultural institution virtually synonymous with the era and Americana itself. Disney animation rebounded with Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, and Lady and the Tramp, all four of which take place in the 19th century. He entered the field of documentary filmmaking with the True Life Adventures. The Disneyland Records label produced such an interesting and diverse range of LPs that it could be a whole video of its own. He took over television with Disneyland, the Mickey Mouse Club, and Zorro. Davy Crockett became one of the biggest popular fads of all time. And Disney entered live action with a beautiful, serious, but nonetheless reassuring science fiction epic. I would even argue that Disney as we really knew it, before its current management, was really a product of mid-century Americana, and except for the Disney Renaissance, has never replicated that depth of cultural hegemony. The influence of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was also felt outside the Walt Disney Company. Its success spurred on an entire subgenre of Victorian science fiction films and Jules Verne adaptations during the Atomic Age. 20,000 Leagues was followed by Michael Todd's Around the World in 80 Days, which I think is the best Hollywood movie for capturing the spirit of Verne's writings. And From the Earth to the Moon, Journey to the Center of the Earth, H.G. Wells' The Time Machine and First Men in the Moon, Vincent Price's Master of the World and War Gods of the Deep, Ray Harryhausen's The Mysterious Island, which is close to a sequel to Disney's 20,000 Leagues as you can make if you're not Disney, Valley of the Dragons, which adapted Off on a Comet, Flight of the Lost Balloon, which adapted 5 Weeks in a Balloon, an actual proper adaptation of 5 Weeks in the Balloon would follow, George Pal's historical fantasy Atlantis the Lost Continent, the American import of Carol Zeman's astonishing artistic masterpiece, The Fabulous World of Jules Verne, Disney's In Search of the Castaways, which took one of Jules Verne's adventure stories and rendered it as a family musical starring Hayley Mills and Maurice Chevalier, the caper comedies The Great Race and Those Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines, Jules Verne's Rocket to the Moon, the Cowboys and Dinosaurs Western Valley of Gwangi, and ending with Captain Nemo and the Underwater City in 1969. After that, nostalgic Victorian science fiction, and indeed the entire Atomic Age science fiction genre, fell out of disfavor, thanks to 2001: A Space Odyssey and the dour, depressing, bleak, modern science fiction films of the 70s. But while it lasted, each of those films in the subgenre of Victorian sci-fi carried some imprint of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Many included at least 1 or 2 songs. Often there was a funny animal. James Mason and Peter Lorre starred in several. Some were almost straight remakes, like Master of the World. These films in turn redeemed Jules Verne and cemented his legacy as an optimistic futurist with a charming, nostalgic quality. Verne himself might have been reduced to an obscure, unread, outdated author if not for Disney's film, and in the process, Verne and Disney were conflated as fellow optimistic futurists. Sadly, despite accomplishing all of this for science fiction as a genre, Verne as a writer, and Disney as a company, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea rarely gets the respect and attention it deserves. This inventive, grand, epic, beautiful, charismatic, culturally important film has too often been relegated to a mere footnote of history, exempted from far too many lists of greatest science fiction films and greatest Disney films alike.